Dawn and Carla have been married for 8.5 years and have 2 kids, an 8-year-old named Steve and a 4-year-old named Lori. Carla was pregnant when they got married, and Steve was born 6 months later. Most of their friends and family didn't think it was a big deal that they got married, except for Carla's parents. They were disappointed in Carla and blamed Dawn for everything. They thought Dawn was not good enough for Carla and that she had to settle for him, which made Dawn feel bad. I did what Carla's parents accused me of. I convinced her I was her first. That part is true. But I love Carla deeply, and she knows it, even if her parents can't see it. They blame me for her getting pregnant, and nothing I do changes their minds. They'll always see me as the bad guy. Carla and I met when she was a high school senior in Chicago Heights, and I was in my second year of college at the University of Illinois in Champaign. I knew she was the one for me from the moment we met. We became a couple quickly and felt like a perfect match. We were intimate about a month into our relationship, and it became a regular part of our time together. After Carla finished high school, she moved back in with her parents and started working as a teller at a Chase Manhattan bank. We saw each other almost every weekend, either in Chicago Heights or Oak Lawn, where my parents lived. When Carla was 2 months pregnant and I had 1 year of college left, we decided to get married quickly. We had a wedding in November, and 6 months later, Steve was born in May. I finished my degree just 2 weeks after Steve's birth and got a job in airport security at O'Hare Airport. Carla stayed with her parents until I finished college and got a stable job. We set up our home in a Dane apartment and moved in after my graduation. Finally, we were all together as a family, and for the next 8 years, life was great. We got better jobs, bought a new house, watched Steve grow up fast, had a happy marriage, welcomed Lori, and both kids did well. Our careers progressed, our income increased, and we were very happy. You've had a period of unhappiness in your life, and it all started with arguments with your wife about who was keeping the other from sleeping well. You both complained about each other's snoring, with each of you insisting that the other was the problem. Your wife didn't believe she snored, but you found her snoring annoying and it would wake you up. You thought she blamed you entirely for the lack of sleep, even though you knew you snored too sometimes. This disagreement caused tension and discomfort in your relationship. To solve the problem, I brought home a voice-activated recorder from work and placed it on the nightstand next to our bed. I jokingly told Carla we'd find out who snores and who doesn't the next morning. We both woke up at the same time. After a sweet morning kiss, we listened to the recording. Sure enough, my snoring sounded like a chainsaw, and Carla teased me about it, saying, "See what I have to deal with." But then we heard her snoring too, making a squeak, squeak, squeak sound between my snores. Carla was surprised and laughed, admitting, "Oh my goodness, I'm terrible." We both laughed and agreed that we needed to work on our snoring so we wouldn't disturb each other's sleep. I joked that she needed to work on her squeaky snore. I felt relieved that I wasn't solely to blame. Carla playfully apologized for putting all the blame on me and admitted that we were both at fault. We shared a warm kiss and hug and spent some intimate time together. However, we got carried away, and by the time we finished, the kids were awake and we were running late for work. As you can imagine, we forgot about the recorder. A couple of days later, Carla asked me to come home early to look after the kids because she had a meeting at the bank. While at home, I couldn't resist the urge to listen to the recorder again. I was hoping to hear proof of her snoring, but instead, I heard something unexpected. The recording captured the sounds of us being intimate. It was a shocking revelation. Carla had been unfaithful in our bed with another man. After discovering the contents of the tape, I quickly asked our neighbor Judy to watch the kids for a while, explaining that I had a major work project. Judy agreed, and I took the kids to her place, making sure they behaved and telling them I'd be back for dinner. They were happy to spend time with Judy and her kids. Back in our bedroom, I played the recording again. Carla's voice said, "Steve, it's been too long since we've been close. I've missed that. I'll be intimate with you this afternoon. I want to get pregnant today, Dawn, and I want another child. I want all 3 of my kids to have the same father. Doesn't Dawn ever get suspicious of us? Doesn't he wonder why the kids don't look like him at all? Is he clueless? Don't talk about Dawn like that. He's not clueless. I've never given him a reason to doubt me. I still can't believe you got away with it. Thankfully, Steve Jr. and Lori look like me, so Dawn has no reason to be suspicious. Well, maybe today I'll have a child who looks like me and reveals everything. Then Dawn will leave you and you can marry me." The recording continued with Carla asking Steve to stop discussing hurting Dawn. She emphasized that what they shared was just passionate fun and nothing more. I listened to the rest of the recording, which contained intimate sounds between a man and a woman. It's too painful for me to describe in detail. Hearing it all was like a heavy blow. My whole marriage felt like a lie. The love, trust, and closeness I thought we had were non-existent. How could she claim to love me and do those things? Listening to that tape was devastating. I felt deeply hurt, physically sick, my heart raced, and I prayed it wouldn't give out on me. I felt repulsed, emasculated, scared, and angry. It's too much to continue describing. Devastated sums it up best. You were practical and realized you needed to plan your next moves carefully. Securing a copy of the tape for evidence was your first priority. Since the recorder had a dual tape system, you duplicated the recording from tape 1 to tape 2 and kept the copy in a plain envelope in your car's trunk. This ensured you had evidence regardless of what happened next. Secondly, you decided to keep your knowledge a secret until you had a plan. You erased the intimate part of the recording, leaving only the snoring segment. Then you returned the recorder to the nightstand and left the bedroom. This way, if Carla checked the tape, she wouldn't find anything incriminating and you wouldn't give away that you knew about her affair. You decided to gather all the facts before making any decisions. You started by recalling how you and Carla first met and went from there. Remembering that you got to know her through a friend of hers from school, you thought her high school yearbooks might provide valuable information. So you searched your basement until you found the box containing both your high school yearbooks and put them in your car's trunk. You made sure to leave everything else in the basement as it was to avoid suspicion. If Carla noticed the yearbooks were missing, you could say they got mixed up in another box. Feeling that seeing Carla that night would tip her off that something was wrong, you reached out to your boss, Jim, for help. You trusted Jim and knew you could confide in him. You shared what you discovered and asked him to cover for you for a few days so you could investigate further and make your final decision. You asked Jim to set up a trip to New York for you, pretending it was for an anti-terrorism school. This excuse aligned with courses you'd taken previously, so it wouldn't raise suspicions. Despite having no intention of actually going, you needed to create this cover to buy yourself time for your investigations. Jim agreed to help with the cover story, emphasizing the urgency of the last-minute class. Within an hour, you were supposed to be on a plane. You called Carla and explained the urgent trip, mentioning that you left the kids with Judy and were headed to the airport. You assured her you'd update her with more details once you had them. You left for your trip despite Carla's reluctance, explaining that it was out of your control. After hanging up, you went to Judy's and informed her about the sudden trip. You arranged for Carla to pick up the kids from Judy's place in an hour. Judy agreed, and you asked if you could take Steve and Lori home with you temporarily while you packed and said your goodbyes. Judy was okay with that, so you brought the kids back to your place. Before departing, you needed to collect DNA samples from Steve and Lori. You managed to get saliva samples from them using Q-tip swabs. Your plan was to have their DNA analyzed and compared to your own to confirm that you weren't their biological father, aligning with Carla's confession on the tape. After packing and dropping the kids off at Judy's, you thanked her for watching them and left. You drove to a hotel in Harvey, a suburb on Chicago's south side, far enough from Carla's family to avoid running into them, but close enough to use as a base for your investigation. Once at the hotel, you bought some beer and got drunk as a way to cope with the pain and hurt. The next morning, you felt awful with a pounding head and upset stomach. To alleviate the symptoms, you had a couple more beers. Surprisingly, it helped, and when you woke up again in the afternoon, you felt somewhat better. You ordered coffee and toast from room service, then showered and dressed in clean clothes. The coffee helped, and you managed to keep the toast down. As you pondered what to do next, you checked your phone and found 3 messages. The first was from Carla, upset that you hadn't called her upon arriving in New York because she didn't know where you were staying. She asked you to call her as soon as you got her message. The second call was also from Carla, expressing her frustration that you hadn't called her the previous night or that morning. Despite her irritation, you were planning to give her a bait excuse when you finally talked to her. Jim called just a few minutes after Carla, informing you that she was demanding to know your whereabouts and what was going on. He mentioned that he had to deal with her, and that you owed him for it, which you agreed with. Jim explained to Carla that he had no more information than she did about your location since he didn't know the hotel. He also told her about the seminar at a conference center at JFK Airport, suggesting she could try reaching you there. However, both of you knew the challenges of airport security, making it nearly impossible for her to find you even if you were there. Since you weren't actually at the airport, it was even more unlikely, so you felt safe until you called her. You had a couple of hours before Carla got home from work, so you focused on your investigation. Using your laptop, you created a checklist and organized everything you already knew while noting the details you needed to find. You went through Carla's high school yearbook, compiling a list of everyone who had written comments and cross-referencing them by class year. You also contacted her high school to inquire about a reunion book for her upcoming 5-year reunion. The administrative assistant was helpful and provided you with a copy of the 10-year reunion book as well, which was forthcoming. You asked for an electronic copy and received it shortly after providing your email address. With the reunion books in hand, you matched the names from the yearbook with their married names, spouses' addresses, and phone numbers. This effort yielded a wealth of information, including details like the names of children, pets, hobbies, favorite foods, and more for all of Carla's classmates. You also discovered that Carla had submitted your current information, including your 2 kids, with a note indicating her hopes for a third child soon. "Hi, Carla. I thought maybe you want to talk tonight after everything," I said. "Well, I did expect to hear from you earlier. I was worried and didn't know where you were," she replied. "I understand your concern, but the last time I called, things got a bit tense. I didn't want to add to that," I explained. "I'm sorry for being short with you earlier. I was just anxious and couldn't reach you. This trip of yours caught me off guard and I felt a bit lost. Can we start fresh?" she asked. "I appreciate the apology, but it doesn't sound like you've fully forgiven me," I noted. "It's hard, Don. This situation is difficult for both of us," she admitted. "Well, then I'm a bit upset too, considering everything," I replied. There was silence on her end for a while. I wasn't sure if she suspected anything, and honestly, I didn't care much. I hoped she was reflecting on our relationship, though. After a moment, she said, "Well, I'll let you go, Don. I'm sorry. I love you." "I'm sorry, too. Good night, Carla," I responded. I managed to get some sleep that night, even though it was restless. At least I didn't have to hear her snoring, but it made me sad to think about it. I remembered how cute she was when she first realized her snoring was annoying. We had laughed so much and had a great morning together. But thinking about what happened afterward and what might never happen again broke my heart once more, and I drifted off to sleep. The next morning, I began early with my lists. Using my track phone, I called several female friends pretending to be Roger Moore from Homeland Security. I explained that I was conducting a background check on Don Phillips, possibly joining the Chicago Area Anti-Terrorism Task Force. I mentioned his marriage to Carla Pond and asked if they knew her from high school, gathering information about Carla's high school associations during these calls. It confirmed that Steve Wilson was indeed Carla's high school boyfriend, and they dated for about 3 years until she ended the relationship shortly after high school. You also discovered that Steve still lived in Chicago Heights, working as a loan officer at Chase Manhattan Bank there, and he had recently gone through a divorce with 2 sons from that marriage. In the reunion booklet, you found his entry, noting his good looks and understanding why he would attract women. Despite their past relationship, Carla chose you and gave you her virginity. However, she maintained a connection with Steve for years, allowing him to father your children. The reasons behind her actions remained a mystery, leaving you with unanswered questions. Maybe Carla could provide some answers, but you weren't sure. The fact that Carla and Steve continued to work together at the bank until you moved added another layer of complexity, given their close proximity and potential for rekindling their connection. The reasons behind Carla's choices were still unclear to you. You approached Jill Johnson under your guise as Roger Moore from Homeland Security, seeking information about Carla Peterson's background as Don Phillips' wife. As soon as you mentioned Carla, Jill didn't hold back and expressed strong negative opinions. She described Carla as unpleasant, a boyfriend stealer, and a cheater, citing an incident where Carla took Steve Wilson away from her while they were dating in high school. Jill believed this spoke to Carla's character, even though boyfriend stealing isn't illegal. Jill continued, sharing rumors that Carla had resumed her relationship with Steve after working together at the bank. Steve allegedly claimed to have fathered 2 of Carla's children and spread gossip about her being pregnant again, which was the latest talk in their circles. Jill expressed doubts about trusting Don Phillips with national security due to his unfaithful wife, based on these rumors and perceptions of Carla's character. It must have been incredibly painful to hear such candid and negative perspectives about Carla from people who knew her in different capacities. Jill and the other female non-friend provided similar accounts, highlighting Carla's past actions and rumors surrounding her relationship with Steve. The sister of Steve's ex-wife shared that her sister divorced Steve upon learning about the rumors and his claims of fathering more children with Carla. This revelation confirmed the validity of the rumors circulating about Carla and Steve's involvement. The male non-friend's story added another layer to Carla's past, revealing her interactions with Steve and her attitudes toward relationships. His account painted a picture of Carla as someone who may not prioritize faithfulness or commitment in her relationships. This realization likely added to the pain and disillusionment you felt. It became clear through these conversations that Carla's behavior and attitudes toward fidelity were not what you had believed or hoped for in a spouse. It's understandable that this discovery would be deeply hurtful and challenging to come to terms with. You decided to visit the bank to observe Steve in person, gathering more insight into his character. Despite his negative reputation, you noted that he physically matched the descriptions you had heard, tall and athletic. You contemplated the missed potential if not for his reputation. After your visit, you had a few more tasks to complete before heading home. You checked into a hotel near the airport and called Carla in the evening, letting her know you'd be home by noon the next day and suggesting spending quality time together in the afternoon. This gesture showed your willingness to maintain a sense of normalcy despite the turmoil you were facing. You maintained a resilient attitude despite the emotional turmoil, choosing not to reveal what you had uncovered to Carla just yet. You reassured her of your love and optimism for the future before having a restful night's sleep. The following morning, you had a detailed conversation with Jim, sharing all the information you had gathered about Carla and Steve. Jim was supportive, and you even received the results of the DNA samples you had taken, opting for overnight service to expedite the process. You wanted Jim to be fully informed and involved, considering his roles as both a friend and boss, knowing that you might need his support in the future. Dear Mr. Phillips, we have completed testing on all 5 samples you provided on Wednesday, November 15. Sample 1 is a male and is a full sibling to Sample 2, also a male. Sample 3 is a male and is a full sibling to Sample 4, who is a female. Samples 1 and 2 share the same father and have a different mother than Samples 3 and 4. In other words, all 4 samples share a common father, but Samples 1 and 2 have a different mother than Samples 3 and 4. As for Sample 5, which we know is you, Mr. Phillips, it is in no way related to any of the other samples. So there is no DNA evidence to indicate that you are the biological father of any of the 4 children represented as Samples 1, 2, 3, or 4. If you need further assistance, please don't hesitate to contact us. Sincerely, David Raffi, Ph.D., Accurate DNA Labs, Incorporated. You arranged to meet with Steve's ex-wife and obtained saliva swabs from her 2 children after getting her sworn statement confirming her consent for the DNA samples. Before leaving, Jim offered his sympathy and support, expressing his willingness to assist in any way. He also joked about your thorough investigation and the possibility of you taking his job, which brought a moment of laughter amidst the weight of the situation. You gathered evidence including tape statements from Carla's former classmates, a letter from Steve's ex-wife, a certified letter from the DNA lab, and your heavy heart. You then went home to confront Carla. Upon Carla's return, you declined her hug and kiss, and when she asked what was wrong, you offered her a beer but then directly confronted her about the affair, saying, "Carla, I know you've been having an affair." She tried to speak, but I stopped her with my hand. "I don't want to hear anything from you right now," I said firmly. "I know you've been seeing someone else, and I have proof, so there's no point in denying it. I can't trust anything you say anymore. Just sit down and listen to me. Don't talk, cry, lie, or apologize. Right now, all I need is for you to listen." Her face went pale, and I could see fear in her eyes. I offered her a drink, and she chose water. I got it for her and sat across from her, so I could talk to her face to face. "Carla, I know about your affair. I have proof, so please don't doubt it. I want to be honest with you. From now on, I need your actions to show that I'm fully aware of what's going on. It's important for you to believe me because if you don't, you might make mistakes that you'll regret. Here's the plan for today. I'm leaving this house. I'll pack up what I need for the next month and move out. Yes, I won't be living here for a month. We'll still be married, but I won't be here." When I told her this, she gasped and started to whimper, but she didn't openly cry or say anything. I continued, "During that month, you have 2 important things to think about. First, decide if you love me and want to stay married regardless of what I decide. This is crucial. If you don't love me or don't want to be married to me, nothing else matters. So take your time to think about it. After a month, you can let me know. Not sooner, not later. Secondly, you need to write down all the details of your betrayal of our marriage. I used to love the Carla I knew, the one I married. But I have to be honest, I don't love the Carla I've discovered now because I don't even recognize who you've become. So every single thing about your affair or affairs needs to be told to me. I want to know who you had this affair or these affairs with. If it was just one person, I want their name. If there were more, I want all of their names. I want to know why you had this affair or affairs. What did they offer you that I couldn't? I want to know when they started, how often they happened, where they took place, what you did, and what you said. I want to understand what you gained from these affairs. I want to know every single detail, Carla. Don't leave anything out. I want to see the real you, the woman you truly are. I've lost the image I had of you, but if there's any hope of saving our marriage, I need to understand who you've become. Remember, Carla, I have solid proof, so don't hide anything and don't even think about trying to deceive me. If you lie, it's over. But if you tell me every honest detail, there's a chance, just a chance, we could try to fix things. Don't make more of it than that." I could see the fear growing in her eyes, and I was pretty sure she understood how serious things were. "If you can't or don't want to tell me the truth, just tell me by the end of the month, and we'll end our marriage as smoothly as possible. Right now, it's up to you. You have the next month to make all the decisions. Once you've figured out how you feel about me and our marriage, you can email me at work with your decision and your written account on what happened. I expect both of those in exactly 4 weeks or sooner and no later. And if I ever find out you're back in touch with the person you had the affair with, our marriage will be over immediately. Make sure you understand that. Now about the kids, do you want them with you for the next month or should I take them? Either way works for me. If you want them, I'll visit them every Wednesday evening. I'll pick them up from the babysitter and have them until 8:30 p.m., then bring them back home. I'll call you when I arrive so you can come get them, and I know you're here on weekends. I'll take care of the kids on one of the 2 days. You figure out the schedule that works best for you, and I'll go along with it. If you don't want them, you can have the same schedule I suggested. You can pick them up from the babysitter on Wednesdays, and I'll bring them back home at 8:30 p.m. You can have them on one of the 2 weekend days, and I'll bring them to you on that chosen day. I'm going to start packing now, and once I'm done, I'm leaving. Please decide about the kids before I go. With that, I left the room and headed upstairs to pack. I could hear her crying downstairs while I packed, but when I came back down, she seemed to have pulled herself together a bit. Her eyes were red and her makeup was smudged, but she seemed calmer. Dawn, I know you don't want to hear this. You're right. I don't want to hear it. Follow my instructions or we can end this marriage right now. Do you want to keep the kids with you or should I take them? I want them with me, she cried. Okay, then I'm leaving. I'll call you tomorrow to figure out when you'll pick up the kids on Wednesdays and 1 day each weekend. Goodbye, Carla. And I left. The month went by pretty fast. Every Wednesday, I took Steve and Lori out to dinner and then back to my hotel room. Lori, being young, didn't understand much about what was happening, but Steve had some idea that things weren't right. He asked me why I wasn't home, and I told him that his mom and I were having some problems and needed some space to work things out, so it was best if I stayed away for a while. I made sure to reassure him that both his mom and I loved him and Lori very much. Steve seemed okay with my explanation, so I left it at that for now. I'd see Carla each time I dropped off the kids at the house. She'd come to the door to greet them and make sure they got inside okay. Once she started walking towards the car to talk to me, but I just raised my hand to stop her and drove off. I could see her crying as I drove away, and she stayed in the doorway. Exactly 1 month after our talk, I got an email from Carla. It said, "Dear Dawn, I'm really sorry for hurting you. I love you, and I want to be your wife again. Please call me after you read this and come back to me. I want us to be together forever. I need you, and so do our kids. Love, Carla." Reading that, I had a feeling Carla wouldn't be completely honest. I knew she wouldn't admit that Steve and Lori weren't my biological children. But I had to read the letter to be sure. "Dear Dawn, I'm writing this letter to ask you to come back to me. I love you so much, and I want us to be together forever. But I need to be honest with you, even if it's hard for both of us. I love 2 men, you and Steve Wilson. You mentioned I was having an affair, and by most people's definition, I suppose I was. However, I didn't see it that way. Usually, an affair involves a short-lived romantic relationship outside of marriage. But my connection with Steve goes way back, even before I met you. You know, I was with someone else when we met, and that someone was Steve Wilson. We've been together since my sophomore year. Steve is a handsome, charming, witty, intelligent, and caring man. He still has all those qualities. Shortly after I started dating him, I realized I was in love with him. He seemed like the perfect partner, someone any girl would be lucky to have. But there was one big problem. Steve wasn't the type to stay faithful in a marriage. Despite my love for him, I knew I could never marry him. I was determined to save myself for my future husband. Steve kept trying to change my mind, and even though it was tempting, I stuck to my decision. Then I met you. It didn't take long for me to realize I love you and wanted to marry you. But I didn't stop loving Steve. I love you both, but in different ways. It's hard to explain, but that's the closest I can get to describing my feelings. Steve kept pursuing me even though he knew about you and my feelings for you. Once I mentioned to him that maybe after I got married, I might consider being intimate with him. He thought it was strange but didn't push it. After we made love, he could sense that something had changed. He kept asking for what I had mentioned before, even though we weren't engaged or married. Even though I knew you were the one I wanted to marry, Dom, I gave in to Steve. I wanted him too, even though I loved you. I got pregnant, and I was sure it was Steve's child, not yours. But I wanted you to be my husband, not him. I can't believe I did all this to you, but I did. I told you about the baby, and you married me. You never questioned the child's paternity because you were the one who took my virginity. Little Steve looked like me, so there was no doubt about that. I didn't stop seeing Steve when you were away. We kept meeting every month or so. I was still involved with him even after we got married. I loved both of you. You were a great father to Steve and are to Lori as well. I couldn't have asked for a better husband. My love for you kept growing every day. Even though I know it won't make you feel any better, my love for Steve hasn't changed since then. For a couple of years, I watched you closely, almost hoping you would cheat on me so I could somehow justify my actions. But you never did, as far as I could tell. I could see that you were everything a woman could want in a husband, and I was grateful to have you, even though I didn't feel like I deserved you. I know I'm dragging this out, but I'll continue and tell you everything. You wanted me to explain, so I will, providing all the details I can. Who is Steve Wilson? The answer is Steve Wilson. Why? Because I love him. Where? We met in various places, his home, hotels, and motels. We meet at restaurants, parks, and in our cars. I don't remember all the dates and times, but it was usually once a month or every other month. From then until now, we just made it work when we could. We made love, we talked, we kissed, and we hugged. He did things with me that you and I hadn't done. I didn't really want to do those things, but I allowed them with him because our time together was so limited. Don, he loves me too. I saw it as a small consolation because I was your wife living with you while he only had me for brief moments. Steve eventually got married, but it didn't last long because, as I expected, he cheated on his wife. He was involved with me and other women too, which his wife found out about, leading to their divorce. He wanted me to divorce you and marry him, but I made it clear that I would never leave you. I knew he would cheat on me, and it's ironic how I demanded a higher standard in a husband's character than I displayed as a wife. I deeply regret that, Don. I know this is already a lot, but there are two more things you need to know. Steve is also Lori's father. I'm pregnant, and I'm pretty sure it happened the last time Steve and I were together. This means that all three of our children have Steve as their biological parent. I thought it would be best if they were all full siblings, with no doubts. But you are and always will be their father. You've loved and cared for them, while Steve hasn't even met them all these years. He doesn't want to be their father, and I don't want him to be either because I want you to be their father. I'm really sorry for everything that happened and for hurting you so much. If I could go back and change it, I would. I'm hoping you'll come back to me, that you'll give us a chance to fix things and keep our marriage alive. I hope your love for me is strong enough for that. Please come back home to me. I know I haven't answered all your questions, but I promise to talk about everything you want to know. Please give me a chance. I'll be waiting for your call. Love, Carla. The next day, which was Friday, I called Carla and told her I'd be coming home early in the morning. I asked her to take the day off and arrange for the kids to stay with the babysitter because we needed to talk. She agreed and asked what was on my mind. I said, "You'll find out tomorrow," and ended the call. The next day, I walked into the house. Carla was in the kitchen, holding a cup of coffee, which I took gratefully. I suggested we sit down at the table to talk. Once we were settled, I opened my briefcase and put a big stack of papers and files on the table. Carla, this is all the evidence I have. It starts with this audio recording. From it, I found out a few things. You were having an affair with a man named Steve, and it had been going on since before we got married. Neither of my two children are actually mine. You plan to have another baby with him, so I'd be raising a third child for both of you. You said you loved me and didn't want to leave me for him. Her face showed disbelief. If you're wondering where the tape came from, it's the audio recorder we use for snoring. I deleted everything except the snoring to hide that you've been caught. I didn't actually go to New York. I went to Chicago Heights to dig into your past, find out about Steve, and learn about my kids. That's why you couldn't find me in New York. When I found out the truth about you, I didn't want to see or talk to you again. I spread out the high school yearbooks on the table. I figured the best place to start was your yearbooks. I made a list of everyone who wrote comments in your yearbook and sorted them by their connection to you. Here are the details of what I found. I placed my cross-reference list on top of the yearbooks and also pulled out the reunion booklet. The school sent me this for your upcoming class reunion. I used it to get names, addresses, and phone numbers for everyone on my contact list. I got useful info from Jill Johnson Marker and Steve's wife's sister, who was in your class. There was a guy from high school who had a crush on you for a long time, and he was quite helpful too. He stopped loving you when he found out you planned to be with Steve behind my back after we got married. Many of your friends and acquaintances from our hometown know about what you did. Carla, I can't understand how you thought Steve would keep quiet about all of this. He was just as involved as you. The next piece of evidence is a folder containing a letter from the DNA lab. This letter confirms that I'm not the father of our two children. I reached out to Steve's ex-wife, and she agreed to meet with me. She allowed me to get DNA samples from her two kids, hers and Steve's, and this letter confirms that Steve and Lori are half-siblings to Steve Wilson's two children. The letter from Mrs. Wilson confirms that these samples were collected with her permission, and that two of them are from her and Steve's two sons. I have one last folder here. I said, pulling out of my briefcase. Carla, this is all the evidence I have right now. I'm pretty sure I can find more if I tried, like hotel receipts, traces of bodily fluids on clothes, or items I'm not aware of. There might even be witnesses I could uncover if I looked harder. But I don't think I need to do any of that to prove the extent of your affair, do I? She shook her head no. I don't take pleasure in hearing about my wife being involved with another man, and I certainly don't need to hear the details from you, so I won't ask any more about that. Your letter confirms everything I've found, and I appreciate your honesty for once in your life. Thank you for having the courage to stop lying to me. Carla, I loved you with all my heart and gave everything to this marriage. I believe you felt the same, and I was so happy with you. But when I found out it was all built on lies, I realized our marriage itself was a lie. When I first found out, I wanted to confront you, maybe even Steve. I don't feel that way anymore, but I will if I have to. I've been watching Carla's reactions this whole time. She went from being shocked at how I found out to being scared about what happens next for us, and her reaction got even stronger when I mentioned feeling like kicking her. I opened the last file on the table. Carla, these are divorce papers. I've already signed them, and all that's left is for you to sign them too. There are also documents giving me full custody of all the children, including your unborn baby. Her figure turned into panic. I thought I saw desperation in her eyes. Despite everything that happened, seeing her like that made me incredibly sad. It wasn't what I wanted, but I felt I had no choice. I couldn't keep living in the situation she had created. Once you sign these papers, I'll keep them in my safe deposit box. Whether I actually file them with the courts later on will depend on what you do. If you agree to my terms, I won't leave you or kick you out, but we won't be acting like husband and wife for now. I expect you to move your things into the spare bedroom right away because I'll be using the master bedroom. I expect Steve to pay $2,000 per year for each child in child support. This money will go into a trust account for each child until they turn 18, including the new baby. Steve's actions showed he was involved. The total amount due now is $330,000. $116,000 for Steven, $88,000 for Lori as back payments, and $2,000 each for the upcoming year. Additionally, he needs to get fully paid life insurance policy worth $18,000 with the children as beneficiaries and you as the policy owner. This allows you to make any necessary changes. He'll get a letter stating that once he fulfills his commitment for child support, the policy ownership will be transferred back to him. If he doesn't meet these requirements, I'll make this situation public and take legal action to get both past and future child support. His employers will deduct these court-ordered payments from his wages, which could affect his career advancement. I'm not worried about that if he accepts my terms but doesn't meet his future obligations. His life insurance benefits will take care of his children. Take that as you will. I'll have my attorney send him a formal letter explaining all of this, along with copies of all the evidence I've gathered. Continuing with the story, Carla's eyes widened in shock at the ultimatum. She glanced at the divorce papers and then back at me, her expression a mix of fear and uncertainty. I need some time to think, she stammered, her voice trembling. That's fine, I replied calmly. Take all the time you need. But remember, time is of the essence here. The longer you wait, the more limited your options become. With that, I gathered up the files and papers, leaving Carla alone in the kitchen to contemplate her choices. As I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling of sadness and disappointment that lingered in the air. But deep down, I knew that whatever decision Carla made would ultimately shape the future of our family. If you still want an attorney to look at these papers, you have until next Tuesday morning to get that done. But let me be clear. If you refuse to sign the divorce and custody papers and try to leave with the children, I will find you and take legal action, no matter what happened to our marriage. I won't lose my children, and neither they nor I deserve that. I won't accept it, period. There's one more condition. You must never see or talk to Steve again. If you do, when I find out, both of you will face serious consequences. You've already lost me, and you'll lose Steve too, because I insist on it. You won't be allowed to love either of us. Don't make a mistake and lose your children too. That's everything. So do you want to sign these papers now, or do you want to consult an attorney? Yes, I will sign them now, she said. With that, she signed both the divorce papers and the custody papers. I put them in my briefcase and told her I was going to the bank to keep them safe in my safe deposit box. I also reminded her to move into the spare bedroom as we discussed. I'll see you tomorrow, Carla. Goodbye, I said, and then I left. The next day, I moved back in and got settled. Carla had moved her things to the spare room as we agreed. Life continued. To an outsider, our household seemed normal. We were civil, had conversations, ate meals together, played with the kids, and laughed at their antics. On the outside, we looked like an ordinary family. What was missing, though, was any sign of our previous closeness. There were no more secret glances between us, no intimate exchanges, and our warmth had disappeared. I avoided touching Carla, and I didn't want her to touch me. Time moved forward relentlessly, occasionally knocking us down as it went. Many nights I lay awake thinking about what we had lost, wishing it would all go away. I hoped it was just a bad dream that would disappear when I woke up. Unfortunately, it stayed with us every day. I know Carla suffered many sleepless nights too. Sometimes I could hear her crying. In the past, for tears would have broken my heart. I would have done anything to make her happy again. But now I found myself feeling cold and emotionally distant. I had changed and I wasn't proud of who I had become, but I didn't care anymore. I had stopped feeling her pain and struggled to even recognize my own. Over the next few months, Carla tried several times to talk to me about what happened. She wanted us to discuss it and find a way to be happy again. But I responded harshly, telling her I didn't want to hear about her betrayal and that nothing, she said, could fix it. Each time I pushed her away, she withdrew into herself, crying alone in her room. Meanwhile, Carla's body was changing as her pregnancy progressed. One Friday morning, she called me to say she was in labor. I hurried home to take her to the hospital, and 3 hours later, she gave birth to a healthy baby girl. I stayed by Carla's side in the labor room and went with her to the delivery room. I held her hand as she went through the pain of labor and the birth process. When Carla asked me what name I wanted for the baby, I suggested Grace so we could call her Gracie. This surprised her because Grace was her mother's name, and she knew I had concerns about her mother because of her family's treatment of me in the past. I told her she could choose any name she wanted as long as it had no connection to me or my family. She looked shocked and hurt by my response, but the new me didn't care. I just walked away. The next day, I visited Gracie and was captivated by her. She was absolutely adorable, and it didn't take long for her to steal my heart. I found myself falling in love with her, which left me questioning how it could happen. How could I love another man's child? It had happened twice before with Stephen and Lori, although I didn't know they weren't my biological children. How could it happen again? I couldn't explain it, but it did. On Sunday, I went to the hospital to bring Carla and Gracie home. When I arrived, Carla's parents were in her hospital room. Grace confronted me, asking why I hadn't visited Carla on Saturday when I came to see Gracie. I expected Carla to defend me, but she stayed silent. Carla had tears in her eyes and turned away when I looked at her. I couldn't believe she let her mother attack me again. I felt disgusted and furious. I told Grace that what I did or didn't do was none of her business, and if she wanted more information, she should ask her daughter. She argued back, saying I had no right to speak to her that way because she was my wife's mother, and it was her concern. I looked at Carla again, and she eventually said, "Mom and Dad, just leave it alone. I think it's time for you to go so Don can take Gracie and me home." Her father couldn't resist sharing his opinion before he left. He said, "Listen, son, that's not the way to treat your wife's parents, but I should have expected it from someone like you." I replied sharply, "Don't you ever call me son again. I've never been your son, and I never will be. Now please leave." As we drove home, Carla apologized, saying, "Don, I'm so sorry about that." I responded, "Why, Carla? They've never liked me. They've never shown me an ounce of respect as their son-in-law. They've always thought their wonderful daughter married beneath her. Why should I be sorry? You've always allowed them to think that way about me. You've never defended me when they insulted me. Well, now I understand why. It's because you've never shown me any respect either. You started disrespecting me even before we were married, and it's continued every day since. No wonder they don't respect me." Time passed, and the following months I kept myself busy. I arranged for a DNA test for Gracie, confirming she was also Steve's child. The result didn't surprise me. I only needed it for records. I loved Gracie dearly, treating her as my own. Her smile always warmed my heart, and my love for her grew stronger every day. I also spent more time with Stephen and Lori, being the best father I could be. I cherished them deeply and never regretted having them as my children. Though Steve Wilson contributed to their DNA, I was their father in every other way that mattered. Life with my children was wonderful. I adored them, and they adored me in return. But there was a void without Carla, the love of my life. I often found myself longing for her and reminiscing about the love we shared. I missed her dearly, and tears were a common occurrence. In addition to my family life, I took some drastic measures. I used my connections to tap Steve Wilson's phones, both at his office and home. I knew it was illegal, but I was desperate for answers. And as expected, I found what I was looking for. Carla couldn't resist calling Steve to tell him he had another child. Carla's conversation with Steve was both unsettling and disheartening to overhear. It was evident that she was still involved with him despite everything that had transpired. My heart sank as I listened to their discussion about their plans for the future, especially knowing that Carla was hoping for reconciliation with me. It was clear that Carla hadn't changed, and her betrayal continued to unfold. It was a painful reminder of the shattered trust and broken promises that had defined our marriage. Despite my longing for reconciliation, I knew deep down that it was unlikely ever happen. Carla's words cut deep, but they didn't evoke the same pain or anger they once would have. Instead, they only solidified my decision to focus on my children and move forward without her. My heart had been shattered by her betrayal, leaving no room for further hurt or disappointment. From that moment on, my love belonged solely to Stephen, Lori, and Gracie. They were my priority, and I would do everything in my power to ensure their happiness and well-being, even if it meant letting go of the past and leaving Carla behind. Carla was devastated by the news of Steve's death, and she reached out to me for support. However, I remained indifferent to her grief. My feelings towards her hadn't changed, and I couldn't bring myself to offer her the comfort she sought. Instead, I focused on being there for my children, who needed me now more than ever. As for Carla, she had to navigate her grief alone, without the support of the man she had loved alongside me. In the end, it was a stark reminder of the consequences of her choices and the irreversible damage they had caused to our lives. "Hi, is Steve Wilson there?" "Sorry, Steve doesn't work here anymore. Can I help with something?" "I'm just a friend. I'll call him at home then." "Ma'am, Steve had a car crash a few weeks ago. You might want to check with his family for more." "I'm sorry to tell you this." She sounded surprised, and the call ended. When I got home from work that day, Carla seemed to look at me strangely. I didn't act any differently, but she didn't say anything. Later that night, I heard her cry in her room, and it happened for a few nights in a row. Then Carla got a letter from the insurance company about Steve's insurance, with the children listed as beneficiaries. She showed me and asked how to fill it out. When she sent it back, she gave me another odd look. "You didn't seem surprised about Steve's death," she said. I told her, "Carla, I don't have any feelings for Steve anymore. I'm not surprised and I don't care. All I care about is making sure his children have money for their college." My reaction made Carla uneasy, and she kept giving me strange looks. A week later, we got a check for $18,000 from Steve's insurance. Carla and I put the money into the kids' college funds. Each account now had about $46,000 plus some extra from the interest Steve had earned. When Steven went to college, he had around $80,000. Lori would have about $100,000 and Gracie would have about $130,000. That should cover a good chunk of their college expenses. On the way home, I told Carla that at least we didn't have to worry about paying for the kids' college anymore. Carla wanted to talk when we got home. She asked if I could ever forgive her and love her again. I shook my head, saying no. She called me cold-hearted, and I agreed. She wondered how I became so distant emotionally. I explained that her actions caused it. I assured her I didn't feel distant with our children, and she noticed I wasn't like this when I was with them either. I said she never truly loved or respected me and only used me. Then she shocked me by asking if I had something to do with Steve's death. Carla asked if I had something to do with Steve's death. I nodded, confirming her suspicion. She wanted to know why. I explained that I had tapped into Steve's work and home phones, listening in on her conversations with him. I heard everything, including talks about him becoming a father again and considerations of a possible reunion, though not immediately, maybe later. I reiterated that she never truly loved or respected me. She had been using me all these years and would continue if given the chance. The letter continued, "I'm truly sorry for everything. Please know that my decision to end my life was not a result of your actions or our relationship. It's my way of coping with the guilt and shame of what I've done. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I hope you can find peace and happiness without me. Take care of our children, Dawn. They need you now more than ever. With all my love, Carla." Reading her words didn't stir any emotions in me. I felt numb, as if I had already mourned the loss of my wife long before she took her own life. All that mattered now were Stephen, Lori, and Gracie. They were my world, and I would do everything in my power to protect and cherish them, no matter what. Carla's letter was a mix of regret, longing, and acceptance of her actions. She acknowledged the damage she had caused and expressed her hope for my forgiveness and eventual peace. She admitted to seeking love and acceptance from two men, unable to let go of Steve's hold on her. Despite her remorse, she found solace in the love shared between me and our children. She hoped that my love for them would eventually heal the wounds caused by her betrayal. Her final words carried a weight of sorrow and resignation as she expressed her inability to endure the consequences of her choices any longer. Despite the pain she inflicted, her love for me remained evident until the end. In her own way, Carla saw redemption and closure, hoping that her passing would bring an end to our collective suffering. As I read her heartfelt words, I couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness and compassion for the woman who had once been my wife. While forgiveness may not come easily, I understood her struggle and found solace in the love she left behind in our children. With their unwavering affection, perhaps one day, forgiveness and healing would follow. This time, tears flowed freely down my cheeks. They weren't tears of anger or bitterness, but genuine sorrow. I mourned the loss of a friend, a lover, and the mother of my children. I cried for the moments we would never share again, for the love that had turned to emptiness in my heart. The space once filled with hatred was now vacant, leaving me with a profound sense of loss. I wept for the life we had planned together, knowing it could never be. Most of all, I cried for my own soul, realizing how much I had let hatred consume me, making me less than human. In that moment of grief, I faced the truth. Forgiveness was the only path to reclaiming my humanity and finding peace. I made sure to protect Carla's memory for the sake of our children. I got rid of all the evidence of her infidelity except for the DNA results, which I kept in a secure deposit box. only to be opened in case of any future health concerns for the kids. I set up a medical trust in my will and appointed a trustee to manage it, ensuring that Carla's secret wouldn't affect our children's perception of her. Despite the strained relationship with Carla's parents, I never stopped them from seeing their grandkids. They treated them well, even though they held me responsible for Carla's death. I sensed their resentment but appreciated that they didn't confront me about it. They knew better than to jeopardize their relationship with their grandkids. As time passed, my heart gradually filled with love for our children and warm memories of Carla. Despite the pain, she had brought me happiness for 8 years, and I didn't want to erase that anymore. Eventually, I found forgiveness for myself. It wasn't easy, but it happened. I had 3 incredible kids who needed me as their father. I proudly watched Stephen graduate from high school, receiving his diploma and a hug from the school board president. Next was his sister, Jennifer, who also received her diploma and a hug. Jennifer was Stephen's girlfriend, and they had been together since his first day of high school 4 years ago. I couldn't have been prouder of him, and I couldn't help but feel that Carla would have been proud too. Tears filled my eyes as they walked off the stage together, looking so grown up. After the ceremony, Stephen and Jennifer, deeply in love, announced they were both heading to the University of Illinois in the fall. It was clear to everyone they'd eventually marry. I was sure Carla would have liked Jennifer too. They came down to the audience and gave me a big hug. I couldn't have been prouder of them. They excelled in school and sports. Their future looked bright. Stephen asked if they could go to a few graduation parties before coming home, and I agreed. Jennifer called me Daddy as she hugged me, and it struck me. I had become her father too. A few weeks after Stephen started high school, I met Leslie, Jennifer's mother, who was also the school board president. Stephen kept talking about Jennifer and how great her mom was, so we eventually met at a football game. I felt like a teenager again because I was immediately smitten with Leslie. I probably acted like a fool. I learned that she was a single mom. She had divorced when Jennifer was 9, and her ex-husband wanted nothing to do with their family. After chatting for a while, I asked if she wanted to get coffee after the game, and she said yes. We spent a lot of time together, and a year later, we got married. I love her deeply, and she loves me back. For a long time, I didn't think I could ever be happily married again, but I am. For the past 3 years, we've been a complete family. She loves Stephen, Lori, and Gracie as if they were her own, and I love Jennifer like she's my own daughter. I've come to understand that being a parent isn't just about biology, it's about love and care. Leslie knows everything about my past with Steve and Carla. I didn't want any secrets between us if we were going to build a life together. When I told her everything, she was surprised but believed that our difficult times were behind us, so she wasn't worried about our future. Our life together is wonderful. Leslie is not just my wife, but also my friend and companion for all my dreams. My heart is full of love for her and our children. While there's a small space for the good memories with Carla, it's nothing compared to the love I have for Leslie and our family. Stephen has grown into a handsome young man resembling both his mother and father. Lori and Gracie, on the other hand, remind me so much of Carla. They're beautiful and charming, and I'm grateful to Carla for giving me such amazing children. As Stephen, Jennifer, Lori, and Gracie grew older, I made sure to share as much as I could about their mother with them. I wanted them to know her as I once did, to love her as I did, and to understand that she loved them deeply. But just as I was lost in those thoughts, Leslie came over and asked about Stephen and Jennifer. I explained that they wanted to attend a few graduation parties before coming back home. Leslie smiled and suggested that we head home and start working on the baby we had talked about. Excitedly, we hurried to the car and headed home. Life is good, and it's only getting better with each passing day.